I was raised vegetarian. I went to Loma Linda University, which is this famous Blue Zone Mecca vegetarian school. And my health sucked. My body composition sucked. I did not feel that good. Eating mostly carnivory, I feel a million times better. And a lot of health conditions went away. I had, really bad eczema before. I don't think it's a problem to not eat vegetables.
Welcome to Corporate Warrior, the podcast that brings you the best advice on how to improve your health, optimize performance, and maximize productivity. With your host, Lawrence Neal.
This episode is brought to you by ARX, the most innovative, efficient, and effective all-in-one exercise machines I've ever seen. I was really impressed with my ARX workout. The intensity and adaptive resistance was unlike anything I've ever experienced. I love how the machine enables you to increase the negative load to fatigue target muscles more quickly, and I love how the workouts are effortlessly quantified. The software tracks maximum force output, rate of work, total amount of work done, and more in front of you on screen, allowing you to compete with your previous performance to give you and your clients real-time motivation. The ARX uses a computer-controlled motor to give you the exact amount of resistance your clients need 100% of the time. This means that the resistance can never become dangerous, is intuitive and simple to use, and can provide you with all the results you and your clients are looking for in a fraction of the time. ARX is highly effective and efficient in delivering all of the benefits of exercise, including increased strength, muscle mass, cardiovascular conditioning, bone mineral density, and injury recovery. As well as being utilized by many high-intensity training trainers to deliver highly effective and efficient workouts to their clients, ARX comes highly recommended by world-class trainers and brands, including Bulletproof, Tony Robbins, and Ben Greenfield Fitness. To find out more about ARX and how you can get $1,000 off software licensing when you place an order, that's right guys, $1,000 off, please go to arxfit.com and mention Corporate Warrior in the How Did You Hear About Us field. So again, to get $1,000 off software licensing when you order, head on over to arxfit.com and enter Corporate Warrior in the How Did You Hear About Us field. This episode is brought to you by my former podcast guest, Alex Fergus. Alex is a passionate health coach and has worked with hundreds of clients to help them transform their body composition and health. He's been featured on PaleoFX, the Mind Muscle Project, and Superhuman Coach. Alex is an accomplished athlete representing New Zealand in rowing, winning national bodybuilding titles, and breaking powerlifting records. He's an absolute beast and has very impressive quads and won the PaleoFX Real Fit competition, beating people like Ben Greenfield. And get this, 9 months leading up to the competition, Alex only trained for 15 minutes per week using Body by Science high-intensity training principles. Alex pays close attention to every aspect of his health. As a former chronically sleep-deprived young adult, Alex has invested heavily to optimize his own sleep quality for maximum benefit, and has devoted much of his time to researching how to maximize sleep quality to improve your overall health and performance. Alex is giving away a free 4-part sleep improvement series with tips that will help you fall asleep faster, give you more energy, and improve your overall body composition. To get access to his free 4-part sleep improvement series, go to corporatewarrior.co/Alex and sign up now. So again, to significantly upgrade your sleep for free, go to corporatewarrior.co/Alex and sign up now. Hi guys, I am Lawrence Neal and welcome to another episode of Corporate Warrior, the podcast that teaches you how to optimize your high-intensity training protocol and your high-intensity training business to help you achieve your health, fitness, and business goals. My former guests include people like Ben Greenfield, Ryan Hall, Dr. Doug McGuff, Skylar Tanner, Dr. James Fisher, Mark Sisson, Andy Magnus, and many, many more. My next guest is Dr. Ted Naiman. Ted is a board-certified family medicine physician and one of the top experts right now on the subject of diet and metabolism. Ted's first interview, which I recommend you listen to as well, was my most popular episode of all time by an absolute mile. I absolutely love recording this part 2 with Ted. He's so easy to talk to and such an interesting guy. I think you guys are going to absolutely love this one. We cover Ted's fascinating results after spending at least the last 6 months doing a full body high intensity training workout almost every single day. So we dig into this and his latest views on high intensity training in absolutely great detail. We discuss how stacking stressors, like I recently did, can really work against you when you're trying to build muscle, especially alcohol, and Ted digs into some of the mechanisms behind this. Ted shares his opinion on the very controversial zero-carb diet protocol and helps me to reconcile a lot of the controversy around different diets a la high-fat, low-carb, low-fat, high-carb, and explains when calories matter and when they may not matter, and much, much more. For all the show notes and links for this episode and all episodes, please go to corporatewarrior.org, and don't forget to hang around at the end of this episode to find out how you can get a free book of transcripts with some of my top guests and join my email list. And now I give you the most popular corporate warrior guest of all time, Dr. Ted Naiman. Ted, welcome back to Corporate Warriors. Great to have you back on the show for part 2.
Oh, thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So you posted a really provocative picture recently, which was of your very shredded and muscular physique following a single set to failure kind of experiment that you've been running, I believe, since we last did a show together. So is that, I know you were doing single set to failure daily before that, although you were having a skipped guilt-free day if you had to skip a day. So had you increased your frequency since we last spoke in terms of your training?
Yeah, absolutely. And I got to be honest, it was totally inspired by you.
Really?
So, absolutely. So I got off of the last podcast with you and I was thinking about my workout routine. I was basically doing, maybe 4 days a week and throwing some rest days in there and hitting every muscle group every other day. And I was, after we talked, I was thinking about, frequency, and I figured, it's always felt to me like possibly just crap that you couldn't work out every muscle group every day. You know what I mean? This didn't feel right to me. So I thought, I'm actually going to just try that.
Why didn't it feel right to you?
I'm watching these male Olympic gymnasts who specialize in rings, and I'm looking at their arms and I'm like, wow, do you think these guys work out daily? Do they work out daily with a high intensity? Do they work out daily with a high intensity when they're a little bit sore? And I mean, these guys' arms look like my legs, seriously. And so it doesn't pass the sniff test to me that daily workout is actually going to be worse. Now, I'm at no point am I saying that it's superior to work out every day than every other day. My only point here was that it's not inferior to work out every muscle group every day. And I decided, there are the 3 things you can alter: the frequency, the intensity, and the volume. And so I decided, well, I've maxed out the intensity. That's clearly my favorite. That's clearly what I think is the most important. That's why I'm on your podcast, let's face it. So then I figured, what would happen if after maxing out the intensity, I also maxed out the frequency? And that would be, I guess you could do 2 a days, but that did seem a little over the top. So what I did is I went from basically doing 2 sets to failure more or less every other day to 1 set to failure daily since we last spoke. And it's just clearly been effective for me. I mean, it's really noticeably great. I haven't seen any downsides at all.
So a couple of questions that come to mind. Have you measured the before and after? So can you empirically say or objectively say that you've increased lean mass?
My weight has gone up with the same waist circumference, so I think so, but I haven't done a DEXA scan or anything formal like that. So it's not horribly scientific. I can tell you that my strength has gone up looking at moves that require a lot of strength, like a one-arm chin. And I can tell you that my weight has gone up with the same waist circumference. So I'm assuming that that's the case, although I can't really prove it.
How much weight are we talking?
Maybe 2 pounds.
Okay.
But this is like a weekly rolling average, so...
So not 2 pounds a week?
No, I'm saying I weigh myself every day and then look at kind of a weekly average.
Okay, cool. So have you ever considered going to get a bod pod done or a DEXA just to get like an accurate, or do you just not care enough to do that?
I just don't care enough to do it. I think if it was right in front of me and free, maybe I would.
It's funny though, because 2 pounds sounds pretty small, and for anyone that knows much about muscle gain over the long term, once you kind of hit your genetic limit, like it, 2 pound or 2 pounds a year is significant.
Correct. Absolutely. I mean, honestly, from my perspective, everything I'm doing is just a war of grams on a daily basis. Like if every day I could add 1 gram of muscle, I will be thrilled. I kid you not. It's like every day can I shave down 1 gram of fat and add a gram of muscle, and I'm really fighting this gram war daily.
What kind of body fat percentage do you walk around at most of the time?
I don't really know for sure, but I do have, skin calipers and measurements. So using these kind of low budget tools, I would say about 10%.
Okay, cool. Now, when you talk about your progression, I'm not sure if you are able to do one-handed push-ups or one-handed chin-ups cleanly when we last spoke. Maybe I'm wrong. So is that what you were able to do now? You can actually do a one-handed chin-up and one-handed push-up? If so, how many can you do? What's your progress been in terms of actual exercises and making those more difficult?
All right. Well, okay. I can still just barely do these moves, although I can do them now. And it's really interesting when you're looking at a move that requires pretty much all the strength you've got, like a one-arm chin, a one-arm push-up, a muscle-up. The interesting thing to me with these moves that I'm just on the bare edge of being able to do is in the past, before we last spoke, if I would go a week without doing a one-arm chin or a muscle-up, I literally couldn't do it. You know what I mean? So when I'm teetering on the edge of this skill and I don't do it for a while in the past, I would actually lose it. And I know that in this high-intensity world, a lot of people feel like, well, if you went 2 weeks, just resting, you'll actually come back just as strong or maybe even stronger. And honestly, that feels like crap to me. And I think that is actually crap because if I don't do a muscle-up for 2 weeks, I can't physically do it. And I don't know that is a neuromuscular thing. But, I have patients who lay in bed in the ICU for a week. You spend a week in the ICU in bed, and you have to learn how to walk again. I mean, you're extremely weak. You can't go up a flight of stairs. I mean, it really sets you back. So why wouldn't it be the same way with this move I can barely do, like a muscle-up or one-arm chin, if I don't do it and don't use those muscles anywhere near their capacity for a week or two? I mean, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
Do you still kind of transcribe to the idea that you will improve strength and hypertrophy with the kind of progression system that you follow in terms of making, increasing the load, but I guess failing within a brief window?
Yeah, I mean, I still think that that's the way to go. And I'm not saying that the way I work out is anywhere close to best way to work out at all. I think I'd probably get more results with weights. I'd probably get more results with a barbell. I'm just really exploring exercise minimum effective dose. I'm exploring what you can do with hardly any time and any equipment. And I within those variables, I'm trying to figure out, what's possible. What can you accomplish with the very least input in terms of money and time and stuff? And so I'm not saying my way is the best. I'm just trying to explore this, this particular side of things.
I realize I said transcribe. Doesn't make any sense. I meant subscribe. Anyway, interesting. But if you did believe that you could get better results using machines or free weights, significantly better, I think you'd be doing that, no?
I think I probably could get similar results with machines or free weights. Yeah. But I'm just trying to do it without, just on principle, just for the fun of it.
I know, but I guess I believe that, you get the same results regardless of the mode. But if just hypothetically speaking, you did get superior results using those machines or free weights, would you, and being someone, who is really eager to gain as much muscle mass as possible, would that not be appealing to you? And change your strategy?
Probably. I think you're right. Let's face it. If it was dramatically better for me to have a barbell, I would probably go get one. Yeah.
We talked about obviously your workout previously. How does the routine look now, and how has it changed, if at all, since we last spoke?
Oh, it really hasn't changed. It's the same boring Big Five style push-pull squat. It's really just more of the same. I am not doing any kind of muscle confusion. I'm not standing on a Bosu ball. I haven't changed really what I'm doing. It's super, super basic. It's extremely basic. It's embarrassingly basic.
I was going to ask you about single-legged squats, because I do those, or pistols, some people call them. And I recently had a kind of an injury, an acute injury, I suppose, in my hip, and I actually did it playing basketball. And I can't pinpoint the moment I did it. And the cool thing about having a podcast and having relationships with people like you and people like Dr. James Steele and Bill Simone is I can reach out to these people and say, hey, I've done this, what's happening? How can I fix it? And it's interesting, there was a view that maybe doing a single-legged squat puts a lot of force on the hip and may have exacerbated the region and caused the injury in some way, although it's so hard as James Steele was explaining to me, it's so hard to pinpoint what causes a lot of injuries. And of course this happened playing basketball, so maybe it was the way I turned or landed or something like that. But I wondered, have you had any issues with doing single-legged squats across your hips or anything like that before?
Yeah, so when I first started, I would have some pain in the patellar tendons, just below my kneecap. And all of these body weight moves really highlight the fact that your connective tissue has to get used to the exercise way more than your muscle. You know what I mean? Your quadricep muscle is ginormous, but where it attaches to your hip and to below your knee, these little attachments are really tiny, and you're putting a ton of tension on those. And everybody has to strengthen the connective tissue, honestly, way before their muscle gets stronger, just so they don't get injured. And that's why you do kind of want to ramp these up sort of slowly. And if anything hurts, you want to back off a little bit. And yes, I think you're totally right. Doing pistols puts a ton of tension on the quadriceps connections above and below the muscle, and that's a lot of force you're talking about.
Cool. I know that high-intensity strength training isn't your expertise per se, but I know you're pretty well read on it since you've been getting into it in terms of the literature and stuff like that. Do you have a hypothesis for the mechanism behind why doing higher frequency workouts is more beneficial? Do you have a theory around that at all?
Well, I mean, I really don't know, I'll be honest. But what I do know is that there's everybody's theory that you have to give your muscles, 24 or 48 or 72 hours to recover, and that's where all the muscle building happens. But then that's really just a theory, and in the actual practice, maybe that's not exactly how it works. You know what I mean? So everybody has a theory that you need a certain amount of rest, but I don't know if the theory fits the reality for a lot of people. And I do think there's such a thing as probably too much. And for me, what I'm limiting at this point is volume. But in the future, I might even experiment with pushing the volume up a little bit, because it feels to me that, 90 seconds a day, maxing out one muscle group is not too much volume for me, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's interesting. Do you ever get concerned about, going back to obviously talking about the pressure you put on connective tissues and things like that, do you ever get concerned about the sustainability of such a high frequency workout? I appreciate the volume's not too high, but going to failure is an intense feeling, as you know. So I know there's some of my guests have the view that, well, if you're putting the connective tissues specifically under that much tension that frequently, that may cause some issues further down the road, some kind of chronic injuries perhaps. What are your thoughts around that?
I think that's actually probably an argument for doing a move every single day in a non-painful fashion. I mean, if you want huge calluses on your hand, you're going to do something every single day. You're not going to do it so much that you rip the calluses off and have blisters, but you're going to do it every day. If you want huge calluses on your hands, you do some sort of bar work every single day, but not to the point that you tear your skin. And I think it's the same thing with the connective tissue all over your body. You can just battle harden that stuff by doing it every day in a non-painful fashion. Don't actually break yourself, but you push it a little bit every day. And I think it's a great way to sort of battle harden this connective tissue. As long as it's not hurting, daily is probably ideal. You have to work really hard to convince me that lower frequency would be better.
Have you conversed with any of the kind of high intensity training guys who are big advocates of longer, who are on the other side, on the other end of the spectrum in terms of much longer periods of recovery? Have you had any debates with anyone? I'd love to hear a debate with someone like Dr. Doug McGuff or something like that. I mean, I know it's not your expertise, but it would just be fascinating.
Honestly, diet is so much more my field, and I completely defer to the Doug McGuffs and the Drew Bays of the world. These guys know way more about it than me. But I don't know, something about telling everybody that they have to wait a whole week before they can do a 90-second pulling exercise to failure just sounds like bullshit to me. I hate to say it. and I think I think if you just crushed yourself and spent hours in the gym blasting your muscles from every angle, okay, maybe doing that again, an hour later is probably not value added. But, a little bit of something daily, there's a ton of people out there doing daily workouts with a lot of success.
Oh, what, in the same type of protocol as well?
Same type of protocol.
Oh, are they your followers? Have you kind of inspired that movement, do you think?
Oh, well, I mean, these are other people in the fitness world that I'm following, basically.
Oh, okay, cool. That's interesting. So what I was going to say, what inspired your workout? I didn't know whether it was because it's obviously very Project Kratos-esque, a la Drew Bay, but was it that inspired your workout or something else like that the exact protocol that you do?
Well, I love Drew Bay. I purchased Project Kratos. I like it a lot. This is great. I'm all about this sort of thing. But in my particular case, I kind of got into it more from a bar workout point of view. You've got convict conditioning and some of these bar workout guys who have written other books about, just minimalist workouts, working out in your park, you've just got a bar and that kind of thing. And I would say originally that was my inspiration, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Slightly off topic, but interested to ask you this in relation to kind of stress and recovery. So I had a really interesting experience recently. I flew back to the UK to go to a music concert with some friends, and I drank a lot of alcohol that night, and the next day I did an ARX workout, right? And I don't know if you've used ARX, but it's pretty intense. Then I flew to Spain for a 3-day stag do, so there's lots more alcohol to be dragged there as well. So within the period of 8 days, I flew 3 times. I did an ARX workout. I also did a workout in Spain because I'm an idiot, and all my friends are they're all like health and fitness guys, so they wanted to work out in the villa and stuff like that. So I did a workout out in the sun, which was actually really nice, and then flew back, and then literally, Ted, for a whole week I was ill. I was not in a good way. My girlfriend did not enjoy having me back, and it was I just realized wow, this really stressed me out. I mean, it makes sense, right? 3 flights, loads of boozing, and some high intensity workouts all mashed together. And I feel like if I look at myself now, currently in the mirror, I feel like I've lost. I mean, it could just be bullshit and could just be my perception, but I feel like I've cannibalized muscle tissue in this kind of recovery process. And yeah, I just feel like I've lost a fair amount of lean mass. And it's not it doesn't bother me hey, I just rebuild it, right? But I wondered, does that make sense? Could that be plausible? And if so, is there a mechanism for that? What are your thoughts? Or am I just delusional?
I think that is totally plausible. And this is going to be an unpopular opinion, but alcohol is extremely toxic. Alcohol is toxic. All the alcohol metabolites are toxic. And if you look at any alcoholic, they have the worst sarcopenia you've ever seen. These people just have huge abdomens from liver and visceral fat and or maybe even ascites, fluid in the abdomen, and just no skeletal muscle on their appendages. I mean, just look at the arms and legs on a chronic alcoholic. They literally have no muscle mass. You can literally see parts of an alcoholic's body shrinking. If you MRI the brain of an alcoholic, they literally have brain volume loss, brain shrinkage. Their cerebellum shrinks way down. The cerebellar vermis, this little part of your brain that controls balance and movement, just shrinks down to nothing. And then they get this, tremor and trouble walking and all this horrible stuff. So yeah, if you really want to shrink down crucial parts of your body, just drink a ton of alcohol all the time. I know this is not popular, but I basically never drink. I mean, it really is quite toxic. It's really kind of the opposite of my goals.
Wow. So how does that? So you explained a few. The way alcohol affects parts of the body there, but how would it affect muscle tissue directly, do you think?
I don't actually know, but I think that you're probably just dealing with a toxic effect on one hand, and then you might also be interfering with liver. Your liver could spend its time either synthesizing stuff you need or trying to detoxify alcohol, and so you're displacing a lot of other stuff it should be doing with detoxing alcohol. And so maybe that's part of it. I'm not exactly sure, though, to be honest.
It's fascinating. It's funny, because I remember we all got there to Spain, and it was so, because I live in Ireland now, so I don't see a lot of these guys. So it was really awesome to see them all. And that first day, we were on a higher plane, right? Because we weren't hungover, and then the next 2 days just the energy levels dropped and the experience wasn't quite the same. And I always come away from those experiences thinking we didn't need alcohol to make that great. and
Right.
this kind of confirms that. And I rarely drink also. Me and my partner might go out for drinks maybe every 2 to 3 weeks. I don't know, well, it depends how you view that, but to me, compared to most people, that's pretty occasional. But whenever I do it, to be honest with you, most of the time I'm like, why am I doing this? I don't really like the taste. It doesn't really make me feel good. So yeah, it's a strange one. I'm thinking that there will come a time where probably I'll just stop drinking the stuff at all, really. When would you say?
I mean, well, for Ireland, you probably drink very little. It sounds like.
Definitely.
Honestly, I don't think I've had a beer in about 15 years. And I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be on my deathbed wishing, wow, if only I drank a lot more beer. Man, why didn't I? I just don't see that happening.
Fair enough. No, I respect that. Do you drink wine on occasion, or is there any alternatives that you might?
Yeah, I'll have like a glass of wine maybe every couple months or something. It's always social. If I'm going out, I'll drink a little bit of alcohol. So I'm not an alcoholic, or I'm not a complete teetotaler. I do drink a little bit. It's just, honestly, I feel like crap the next day if I drink too much.
I feel like crap if I just drink 1 or 2 sometimes,
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, do you still do the Ultimate Frisbee stuff alongside?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I'm addicted to Ultimate Frisbee. I play that once a week. Cool. It's only about an hour, but it ends up being about 5 or 6 miles of just all out sprinting.
Nice. And do you still do Krav Maga as well on the side?
Oh, I haven't done that since we last talked, so I'm slipping on that a little bit.
No worries. What else do you do, or is that pretty much it from a kind of exercise / activity point of view?
That's really it. That's really it for exercise. It's Ultimate once a week, and the body weight stuff.
Have you played with Mark Sisson yet?
No, but I want to. Mark, I know you're listening to this podcast.
I'm amazed if he does, but he was great actually when I had him on the show. I listened to your episode with Jimmy Moore quite a while back. I think that was recorded actually, and I just thought that was quite funny, so I thought I'd ask if you'd managed to do that. Okay, so before we kind of move on to the kind of more diet-related questions, I just wanted to kind of wrap up this exercise section by asking you about, what are your latest thoughts on optimizing muscle hypertrophy in general? Like, is there anything that you've found in your experience or through the literature or through some other way to improve that response and to improve your muscle hypertrophy?
Well, I mean, again, I think that, you have to play with frequency, intensity, and volume, and somewhere in there is optimum, and I haven't quite figured it out even for myself, let alone for anybody else. But I do think that based on just what I've read in my experience and what I've seen, that probably intensity is most important, and I think that probably frequency is second most important. And but I think there might be a point with volume where you're doing too much, and then another point where you're not doing enough. And I haven't really figured that part out for myself. That's the one that I'm still playing around with. For me, I'm putting intensity number 1. I'm putting frequency number 2, volume third. Part of that is because I'm trying to get it done with the very tiniest time investment, and I think that maximizing intensity and first and maybe frequency second is the way to go if you're trying to invest the very least amount of time.
Cool, good stuff. Regarding diet, so you pinged over a few topics that you might want to talk about, some really interesting stuff. And I just wanted to kick off with protein leverage. Can you explain what protein leverage is and what the hypothesis is around that and your thoughts about it in general?
Sure. Okay. So protein leverage, it turns out that humans have a very strong protein satiety drive, and we've proven with studies that humans will basically eat until they get the amount of protein they need. And humans have this all animals are trying to get to where they need to be nutritionally by combining foods. So like if you had a rat and you fed it just pure protein, you had a bowl with pure protein in it, and on the other end of the cage you had a bowl with just pure energy in it, sugar or fat. The rat or mouse would eat a little bit of one and a little bit of the other, and it would eventually get to exactly where it needs to be in terms of a nutrient to energy ratio or a protein to energy ratio. So we've done all these experiments with animals. We've done this with insects. We've done this with herbivores. We've done this with carnivores. You can take a house cat and give it access to, pure fat, pure protein, and pure carbohydrates, and just watch to see how much of each one it eats. And it will always come up with this same self-selected macronutrient mix, which in the case of a house cat is about 2 grams of protein to every 1 gram of fat, with carbohydrates very low, maybe 7% or so. So nutritional ecologists have done all these studies in all these animals looking at how they get to where they need to be on the macronutrient landscape, combining protein with non-protein energy, fat or carbohydrates. So what we know in humans is that we massively prioritize protein to the point that we will overeat non-protein energy, which is carbs and fats, to get the protein we need, right? You can take food and disguise the amount of protein in it, and you can feed humans a 5% protein food, a 10% protein food, 15% protein food, 25% protein food. If it all looks and tastes basically the same, the humans will always eat an amount that gives them the same absolute quantity of protein, and they may have to overeat non-protein energy, carbs or fats in the process. So the protein leverage hypothesis says, what if it's not really carbs versus fat? What if it's protein? We see all these graphs of the macronutrients that have been added to the food supply over the past, 100, 200 years of the diabetes and obesity epidemics. And you see carbs going up, and the low carb people say, oh, look, carbohydrates went way up. That has to be the problem. But you look at the low-fat vegans, and they're like, oh, actually, fat consumption went up just as much as carbohydrates. Everyone's basically ignored protein because humans have such a narrow protein range that it just doesn't change very dramatically. If you look at every society on Earth, the protein intake is within just a few percent of each other. You know what I mean? So everyone says, well, in America we eat a lot of fat, and in Okinawa they eat a lot of carbs. Okay, this is true. But if you look at the protein intake in both locations, it's very, very close. There's only a few percent differences between all these various human diets. The protein leverage hypothesis says, maybe our intake, our problems are because the protein percentage went down, and you have to overeat fat and carbohydrate to get the same amount of protein. And in fact, that is exactly what has happened to the food supply in this country over the past 200 years. Protein went from about 14% of the diet to 12.5% of the diet. And so when you're eating a lower protein food, you have to overeat carbohydrates and fat to get the same protein satiety. For example, if I fed you a low protein food like French fries, which is 5% protein, you have to massively overeat carbohydrate and fat to hit your protein satiety out of French fries. And that's really what's happened to the food supply. It's called protein dilution. We've dumped in a bunch of refined carbs, sugar and flour, these empty calorie refined carbohydrates. We've dumped in a bunch of empty calorie refined processed fat, basically oil. So sugar, flour, oil gets dumped into the food supply, and now we have protein dilution. Now you're not eating, 14 or 15% protein foods. Now you're eating 12.5% protein foods. And we know from human studies that for every 1% of protein that goes down in your food supply, you have to overeat 14% energy calories in the form of carbohydrates or fat. Right. And it really matches up with exactly what we've seen with the obesity epidemic. So it's just it's a very compelling theory, and I've been researching everything I can on this topic.
It's fascinating. I can totally. I think most people listening could probably relate to that and experience. That they will overeat if they don't have protein to hand. So, but what I guess where I would kind of challenge that is I'm big on controlling my environment. So the reason I think one of the biggest reasons why I'm able to stay really lean is that we never have junk in our home, right?
Right.
So. However, if you put like a massive, packet of scones, I'm looking over there because that's where my kitchen is. If you put some scones on the kitchen worktop or some biscuits or something, but I just had 2 ribeye steaks, I'm still going to eat those biscuits as well.
Right.
And I think I of course I don't have the craving as much as if I didn't have the steaks, but it's still there for me, and I'm sure it's there for a lot of other people. So why do we still get that? Even though we've got 2 steaks, what's that, 80 grams of protein on average? So, why is it we still get that temptation?
Well, I think this is the way humans are wired, because if you zoom way, way out and you look back, 20, 30,000, 50,000 years ago, humans are super protein constrained at this point, right? You're in an ice age. There's not a lot of plant foods. You cannot get a lot of plant energy, either carbohydrate or fat. And so you're mostly eating animals, and these animals are fairly lean themselves because they're also energy constrained. So now you're a human who's protein and fiber constrained. Your plant foods are all fiber. Your animal foods are lean protein, and humans have a tough time living with anything higher than about 50% protein diets by calories. So what you're constantly trying to do is find energy calories to supplement your protein intake. You know what I mean? And you're basically you're protein constrained, and you're looking for energy. That could be carbs or fats. And we see this in hunter-gatherer societies. I mean, when you're a hunter-gatherer, you're out there eating a bunch of protein. You're eating insects, which are, 80, 90% protein. You're eating small animals, which are always a very high percent of protein. And anytime you can get any fat or carbohydrates, you prize that, you crave that. You look at the honey that hunter-gatherers go to great lengths to get. You look at the animal fat that hunter-gatherers go to great lengths to eat, the bone marrow and organ meats. And so you're fighting being protein constrained by trying to add energy to your diet. And that's all humans are doing. We have to eat a certain amount of protein, so we will eat that protein. But then we also love adding energy to it, because that's going to allow us to store fat up for the winter time. And that's what happens. In the summer, all the animals are fatter. You get a lot more fat. There's a lot more plant food. You get a lot more carbohydrate. You eat fat and carbohydrates together, which literally creates insulin resistance and obesity on purpose, so you can store up fat for the winter time. And but then typically there was a winter time where you were eating mostly just protein. You didn't have a lot of extra energy. And that's why humans would go through this cycle where their adipocytes would expand during the summer and contract during the winter, or expand during a time of plenty and shrink down when there wasn't as much.
Okay, cool. Good stuff. So the other kind of big buzzword in the kind of diet arena at the moment is mitochondria. I think everyone hears Dave Asprey constantly talking about this in his podcast. One of the topics you pinged over to me was mitochondria health, and really interested to know, what are the latest findings that really pique your curiosity and interest in mitochondria health, and how important that is as a kind of subsection of health that we should be focusing on optimizing and improving.
Right. Well, okay. The big thing with mitochondrial health is, if you look at anyone in poor health, they have way fewer mitochondria. So if you look at anyone who's obese, pre-diabetic, insulin resistant, diabetic, if you look at anyone with chronic disease, you can look at autoimmune disease, you can look at cancer, you can look at chronic degenerative disease, you can look at any metabolic problem. And what you'll find in common is that all of these people have a worse mitochondrial situation than healthy people. They have fewer mitochondria. They have lower mitochondrial density. They have lower mitochondrial volume and content. They have structurally abnormal mitochondria. They aren't using their mitochondria as much. They're not oxidizing as much fat in their mitochondria. Anything related to mitochondria is worse in people who are unhealthy. So this is clearly something you want to have a ton of. And the way you have more mitochondria is to create some sort of transient energy crisis in your body or in your cell that convinces your body you need more mitochondria. It's just like muscle, right? If my body realizes, hey, I need more mitochondria or I'm going to die, you're going to make more mitochondria. How do you do that? Well, maximum intensity exercise. You hit this massive energy crisis in your cells. You try to push your car up a hill or something, and your body freaks out, and you'll literally grow more mitochondria over the next day or two. Anytime you do something to absolute failure where you have an energy crisis in your cells, you'll make more mitochondria. That's sprinting to failure. That's lifting to failure. You can do other things to get more mitochondria. Thermal loading. If you're just cold all the time.
Thermal loading?
And thermal loading. Yes, this is being in a cold environment.
Oh, got it.
Basically, people who live at higher latitudes, people who have a colder ambient temperature, they have more browning of their adipose, which means they have more mitochondria in their adipocytes. They have more mitochondria in general, just throughout their body. And so being cold, your body compensates by having more mitochondria and then uncoupling them to generate heat. So anytime you're putting stress on your body, maximum effort, anything, lifting, sprinting, being cold, being hungry, intermittent fasting, working out fasted, all of these things create energy crisis in your body, and you make more mitochondria, and it literally makes you better.
Interesting. Do you do things like cold showers and stuff like that?
I try to just be on the cold side all the time. My house is cold. I underdress. I basically wear a t-shirt, and only if it's really, really cold will I put a coat on. I just try to be in a cooler environment. You can actually look at the latitude where you live, and the closer you are to the equator, the higher your risk of obesity and diabetes, just from the lack of need to generate heat. It's really dramatic.
Yeah, I remember Rhonda Patrick talking a lot about this, and she's a real intelligent lady when it comes to looking at all the research on this stuff, but I find it can be quite overwhelming, and I get a little bit confused. And I just wondered, is there a risk in over stressing? So, if you're fasting and then you do a high intensity workout, and then you fast afterwards, and then you have a meal, but then you have a freezing cold shower that night. Is that too much in terms of stress, or is that not how the body stacks it?
I think there's such a thing as too much, but I'm way worried about not enough. I mean, what you really don't want is to be just perfectly comfortable at all times. You don't want your temperature to be perfectly warm, so you never have to generate any heat and be uncomfortable. You don't want to just constantly eat carbohydrates, so you just have this unending flow of glucose, and you never have to make your own glucose out of protein. You never want to stress any of your muscles and you just sit around in a giant recliner chair, you know what I mean, where you never move and you just eat glucose all day and you don't stress out your body, your temperature is perfect. So I think that's the very worst. If you just sat around and never stressed your body out, your health would just implode. So I see so much of that. People who never want to be uncomfortable in terms of manufacturing their own glucose, out of protein, or lifting anything heavy, or getting off the couch, or being uncomfortably warm or cool. And I think that's the bigger danger in today's society. Underdoing this stuff is the bigger problem.
Yeah, fair enough. Do you still do the intermittent fasting 16-8 type of protocol?
Definitely, yeah. I pretty much do 16-8 every day. I really think that's a sweet spot. Sometimes it's a little shorter, sometimes it's a little longer. I keep it flexible and just according to what's going on and how I feel. But that's the basic template.
Yeah. And just for context, those listening, that's kind of fasting 16 hours and then eating within an 8-hour window. So pretty much just having kind of lunch and dinner or tea, depending on where you're from.
Correct.
I was very curious as to your thoughts around Art Devaney's eating and exercising protocol. He calls it the 4x4, which is he eats, I think this is right, he eats breakfast and then about 4 hours later he does some sort of high intensity workout. It's mostly negative orientated strength training. Doesn't go to failure, like it's not like super intense in that sense, but he does do it pretty much daily. And then 4 hours after his training, he eats again. So 2 meals a day, similar to you and I, but different sort of protocol. Like, I just wondered, what do you think about that? Do you think that's suboptimal? Do you think it doesn't really matter? Like, how do you think it compares?
I think everybody should have some sort of fasting window every day. Please let it at least be 12 hours overnight. You know what I mean? But short of that, I think you could get away with a lot of different things. I think it is good to have some sort of fasting interval within a 24-hour period. But I got to be honest, whatever Art Devaney's doing, it has to be working because the guy looks awesome. Like, that's who I want to be when I grow up. So I'll take whatever he's doing, sure.
Because the way I see it is like, if you're focused on having a longer fasting window to promote, I guess, things like autophagy and stuff like that, the way I see like the optimal day going, and I don't always do this, is like working out maybe at like 10 a.m., let's say, or 11 a.m., fasting before that, and then fasting a little bit after the workout, then having lunch, and then having dinner later. So you're kind of achieving everything. You're creating that transient energy crisis, but you'll also have these big gaps between when you eat and when you don't eat. Would you agree that would be like an optimal sort of perfect format, or is there no such thing and it's
I think that would be good. I mean, I do think you're trying to accomplish, multiple things. You're trying to be in a fasted state where you're just living off of stored body fat the way your body's designed to do. But then you're also trying to stimulate muscle protein synthesis, and you're trying to do multiple things at once. And I do think like a fasting feasting scheme is optimum for humans, just looking at it through an evolutionary lens, but like the exact amount of times in there, I'm not really sure what, absolute optimum would be. It's all at a U-shaped curve, and there would be such a thing as eating too frequently and then not frequently enough, and so somewhere in between is the answer, but nobody knows exactly.
Cool. So really interesting. Before I moved to Ireland, I would follow kind of, low carb, kind of slow carb diet type of diet. And I was eating like 3 meals a day. And I was probably like, I know I was around 10 to 12% body fat because I had bod done and stuff like that. And since moving to Ireland, and actually it kind of coincided with me talking to you, I reduced down to kind of eating 2 larger meals per day. It was just more convenient for me when I was living with my girlfriend's mum, and then having moved to Galway, I just love it because it's totally convenient and I don't even think about it. It's a way more efficient and convenient way to live, and I've got leaner, and I don't think I've lost any muscle mass, so I just got shredded eating in this way. And I'm, based on calipers, I was probably at 8% body fat. I know that's not very accurate because it's calipers, but I certainly was way leaner than when I was living in London. And I wondered, is this just a calorie thing? Am I just eating less calories per unit of time, or is it something else? Like, what do you think has kind of caused that to happen from a kind of
I think that, well, first of all, we have a lot of studies on alternate day fasting and people just eating once a day. And you would think that you would overcompensate and just eat more calories, but people really, really don't. And personally, I think it's because you get better at living off of stored body fat, and you basically upregulate the ability to meet all your metabolic needs on stored body fat. And people just, once they're comfortable with that, they're just not quite as hungry. And I also see people getting by with less calories, and they just don't have to eat quite as much. And so sure, you could look at it from the standpoint that that's really just all calories. But I think it's more subtle than that. I think you're looking at improved ability to run your metabolism off of stored body fat. And I think you're probably looking at mitochondrial improvement in that arena as well. And I think that it's a little bit bigger than you're just eating less calories. Yes, you are eating less calories, right? But I don't think that's probably the best way to frame it.
Okay, cool. No, that's interesting. It's so it's kind of inspired by you, but also Sean Baker, because a lot of my meals will sometimes just be like literally 2 steaks or steak and eggs. As you enjoy, and it sounds so simple, but it's totally revolutionized the way I eat. And when I was on this stag trip, I wanted to make sure I was in good shape when I went, obviously. And it's funny because I had a couple of friends genuinely concerned. They were like, "Dude, you're so ripped. Like, do you think you're maybe a bit too ripped or too lean?" I was like, this is hilarious to me because I'm not depriving myself. I'm not starving myself. I eat huge my girlfriend will tell you, like, I eat huge portions of food and I enjoy it massively. Because of these gaps, I just find like I really look forward to my meals, but I don't ever feel deprived, and I don't feel hugely hungry between those. So I feel like this is like such a great way to live,
Oh, I agree. First of all, it's way more convenient. You just don't have to do nearly as much cooking. Yeah. For most of my patients who are doing intermittent fasting like you, it just completely disconnects eating from activities. Like, if you don't have to eat before you exercise, you don't have to worry about eating before an event. You just do whatever you want and then eat when you get a chance. And it completely disconnects eating from what you're doing, and it's very, very freeing to a lot of people. I mean, myself included. I'm right there with you. I feel the exact same way. It's just so convenient. I'll pretty much never go back. So I think I would agree with you 100%.
Awesome. Okay, so talking about food quality, when I was talking to Sean, did you manage to listen to my episodes with Sean at all?
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
Cool,
yeah,
cool,
definitely. Cool. Wouldn't miss it.
Awesome. And Sean made some very, very good points about food quality. And, it's not always that economical to buy like grass-fed steak because it's very expensive and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know. I was kind of a little bit like, well, he doesn't think that that it's that important that it's grass-fed. What are your thoughts on, like, when it comes to food quality? Like, for yourself, like, will you always buy the sort of premium quality food, or do you just, as long as it's like, sausages or some kind of meat, you'll just buy whatever's available?
Oh, wow. I was just reading an article about they did carbon isotope tracing of fast food restaurant ingredients, looking at the chicken and the beef patties and seeing how much of it was sourced just purely from corn, how many of the carbons came just from corn. With the chicken from fast food restaurants like McDonald's, it was just obscene. Like, every single carbon in there came from corn. But it wasn't quite as bad with the beef. You know what I mean? Like, you actually, it seemed to not be, quite a corn-sourced only food. So I think that Sean's right in that if you're eating a ruminant, you can get away with a lower quality animal product. But I still think you really, really, really want to be eating an animal that ate what it's supposed to be eating. I do know that the fatty acid profile in grass-fed beef is superior to corn-fed, and so I think that you really want to aim for quality whenever you can. I always buy pastured eggs. I always buy wild-caught seafood. I try to buy grass-fed beef. But if there's anything that I'm going to let the quality slip on, it will be a ruminant, because it seems to basically, you can feed a cow crap and it will ferment that crap and then eat fatty acids, short-chain fatty acids produced by the bacteria in its rumen, or eat the bacteria themselves, and you're getting a better final product with a crappier input than you would for a monogastric animal such as a pig or a chicken or a fish. So yeah, if you're going to slip on quality, go for the ruminant. But I still think quality is important, and I really try to vote with my wallet. I don't like concentrated animal feeding operations, so I always pay a little bit extra to get pastured eggs and grass-fed beef, and I'm happy to pay that. I'm like, please charge me an extra $1 for pastured eggs. The one with the really orange yolk that just stands up and punches you in the face, because it takes 11 conventional factory eggs to equal the omega-3s in one pastured egg.
I think I remember tweeting that, yeah, sorry.
You just don't want to mess around with that. I mean, you really are what you eat, and so I do try to aim for quality whenever possible.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, because I currently shop at a supermarket here for the beef, but I might actually start doing bulk deals with the butchers, because it'll actually be probably better quality and more affordable because I'll buy it in bulk. So something that I keep meaning to explore further.
Exactly. That sounds good.
Yeah. Okay, so Sean Baker, big advocate of zero carb. He's, I think, right in the middle of a zero carb N equals many experiment, which I was going to participate in, but I kind of got too scared. Now, it's funny. He responded to a tweet I put out, which said, sorry if I was a spider on my foot then. I said, Look, it's like a plate of like sausages and cucumber. I said, look, Sean, I'm doing my best. I can't help but add the vegetables. And then he just said, food plus decorations equals progress. So in summary, Sean feels like vegetables are almost redundant. I think it's fair to say in a diet, and that if you've got red meat at your disposal, then just eat that. What do you think about that? Because I know you eat vegetables, or at least you when we spoke last time. Do you think they're redundant? Do you think they have a place?
I think vegetables are kind of a joke, because every vegetable we eat is literally man-made within the past 1,500 years. We just took these brassica species that happened to not be totally poisonous, right? So 98.8% of all plant matter on Earth is highly toxic and poisonous to humans, and you cannot eat it. And nobody can just go outside in nature and live off of calories from a non-cultivated natural plant. You know what I mean? So we found these brassica species that you happened to be able to eat the whole wild mustard plant without dying, and we've crossbred them to make most of the vegetables in the grocery store. And so I think vegetables are, even if you just go back a couple hundred years, nobody's eating kale. Nobody's flying kale in from the equator. Nobody's getting kale from Southern California. You're not eating a salad in the wintertime. This is a joke, right? You went outside and you butchered an animal. And so I think that vegetables are fine. I think they're okay. But it's definitely not the base of my food pyramid, and you know that eating vegetables did not make us human. Most plant foods pre-agriculture were massively fiber limited, so you weren't getting a lot of calories from them. There probably was nutritional value, but I don't think it was bulk calories. And so also if you look at, some of what we do with food is just stripping energy out of it. But a big part of what we do with food is we make stuff in our bodies from it. And if you look at it from a nutritional ecology point of view, like you're eating all these different things and then you're making something out of it, kind of the fastest track to what you're trying to make out of your food is eating meat. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is basically what you're making from your food. So the most direct route between what you're eating and what you're going to make out of it is to eat an entire animal, probably a mammal. Basically, eating a fellow mammal nose to tail is probably your most direct and efficient route between what you're consuming and what you're trying to manufacture. And so the zero carb people seem a little bit crazy, but I think they're really onto something. I think they're making a great point in that plant-based isn't necessarily the way to go. My other point is 84% of all human calories on Earth are currently plant-based, and we're just not doing that well. I mean, you can't argue with that. 84% of our calories are plant-based. We're not doing that great. That I'm not sure if that's the ultimate solution.
Good point. But you still eat vegetables occasionally?
Oh yeah, I do. Mostly out of entertainment. I think I actually prefer low sugar fruit. What the hell's a low sugar fruit? This is cucumbers, tomatoes, peppers, avocados, olives, pumpkin squash, eggplant. These are all botanically fruit. And I think what you can say about fruit is, unlike vegetables, fruit actually wants to be eaten. You know what I mean? Like, the plant wants you to eat fruit and spread the seeds around. And so this is a food that's not going to be as toxic versus a vegetable really does not want to be eaten. You know, if you just look at a stalk of celery, there are a bunch of chemicals in the cells of the plant that if you break the cell walls and mix and try to consume this plant, you're going to create some toxins that you literally have to detoxify in order to eat that. And the celery plant's doing that because it does not want to be eaten. It doesn't want to be eaten by insects. It doesn't want to be eaten by any animal. Fruit, on the other hand, it actually wants to be eaten. It's the whole point of fruit is that another species is eating it and propagating their seeds. You know, like another species might eat an apple and poop the seeds out somewhere else. Humans, we eat an apple and we throw the core away and spread the seeds that way. And so I feel like your low sugar fruit is something that's probably going to be a little bit less toxic. Don't even get me started on nuts and seeds, which I think really, really don't want to be eaten.
Oh, could you elaborate on that?
Well, okay, so like a lot of seeds are, look at an apple seed. There's a fair amount of cyanide in apple seeds. There are case reports of people literally dying from eating too many apple seeds. If you look at the pit of an apricot, it has a fair amount of cyanide in it. There are a number of seeds that are highly toxic that you can't eat. It will kill you. If you avocado pit, for example, you don't want to eat that part because it actually has. In South America, they make rat poison out of avocado pits. They just break them up and mix them with cheese or lard, and you can kill rodents that way. So you really don't want to eat the seed because this is the plant's opportunity to reproduce. And it has a lot of toxins in because it doesn't want you to eat that part. Fruit wants to be eaten. Seeds, not so much.
And what is your typical diet look like now? I guess it's probably very similar to when we last spoke.
Yeah, it really is basically very highly carnivorous. I eat a lot of ruminants. I eat a lot of red meat. I think that if you look at what humans are designed to eat, humans we're good at running. We're persistence hunters. We can run longer than other animals. We're good at throwing weapons. I think your medium to large grazing, grass-fed, ruminant herbivore is a perfect ideal human food. So I eat a lot of beef. I eat a lot of lamb. I'm eating. I do eat, other forms of meat. I do eat poultry and pork, but less of that. I do eat fish and seafood and shellfish. And then in the plant world, it's a lot of non-vegetable stuff like low sugar fruit and mushrooms, seaweed. That's probably the bulk of my diet. It's a lot of ruminant red meat, a lot of pastured eggs, a lot of low sugar fruit.
Interesting. It's funny because I went for a phase and I pretty much still do the same thing. Well, my kind of typical day is like 3-4 egg omelette with a steak of a ribeye for like late breakfast, like brunch or lunch, and then for dinner I generally just have, again, like a steak with usually a potato, like a big white potato, and like just still feel quite guilty that I'm not having vegetables like every day. It's like so ingrained from like social conditioning and my parents and society. So can you just give me the okay, Ted, that I'm all right to continue doing this?
Wow. Okay, so I used to be a vegetarian. I was raised vegetarian. I went to Loma Linda University, which is this famous Blue Zone Mecca vegetarian school. I was a vegetarian for a super long time, and I had a really good vegetarian diet. I mean, I'm talking, whole foods and vegetables and the whole, all of that. And honestly, my health sucked. My body composition sucked. I did not feel that good. Eating mostly carnivory, I feel 1,000,000 times better. And a lot of health conditions went away. I had, really bad eczema before. It was a huge upgrade to me to be more carnivorous. And so I don't think it's a problem to not eat vegetables. I went through the same thing. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm eating red meat. I can literally feel my arteries clogging. Maybe if I just eat a huge pile of kale, I can, neutralize that. But now, thanks to Dr. Baker and these zero carb people, I actually feel guilty now when I eat a plant food. I'm like, wow, I know this is just junk food and it's just entertainment, but I'm still going to eat it anyway. I hope Dr. Baker's not watching.
Yeah, it's nuts. I mean, I just feel like, like my body composition got way better. I feel fine, sleep great. It's like, what more do I need to know that this is working for me?
Nothing. And personally, I think the protein has a lot to do with it. I'm a huge protein fanatic, so I think anything that just targets protein that hard is going to be good, and that's what you get with a zero carb diet.
Why do you think that?
Why do I think what?
Why do you think that? I mean, I know we spoke about this already a little bit, but like, I'm having a lot of protein. Like,
right.
We're talking probably 120 to 440 grams a day. I'm kind of guessing there, but something like that. And I
think.
Sorry. Yeah, go on.
Oh no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and I'm 5'11", probably weigh 160 pounds, something like that. So that's quite significant-ish.
That's a lot. But I think protein is the secret all the way up and down the scale. I mean, if you look at, a bodybuilder or a bikini model or a fitness model or any kind of aesthetic athlete, and you look at what they do with their body to get the highest lean mass and the lowest fat mass, it's really just targeting the hell out of protein, right? They're eating, a gram and a half per pound of body weight protein. They're both low carb and low fat at the same time. It gives you phenomenally low fasting insulin levels, phenomenal lab results. You really get optimum body composition. I think the whole game in life is the highest lean mass, the lowest fat mass. And then on the other end of the spectrum, look at how you create obesity in a lab animal, right? If you buy obesogenic rat chow specifically designed to create obesity in a lab animal, it's basically sugar and fat. It's a refined, processed, empty calorie carb and fat mixed together, with protein held very low, not too low, just enough to live and to grow. But you hold protein low so that this animal has to massively overconsume energy, non-protein energy, carbs and fats, in order to get to their protein target. And that's literally how you create obesity. So all the way up and down the spectrum, the big secret is protein, and I think that's also why the low carb people are right and the low fat people are also right. What they're both doing is increasing the protein percent of their diet. You scale your fat all the way down to zero, your protein percent just went up a ton. You eat no carbs, you just cranked up your protein percent a lot. And that's why for bodybuilders who target the hell out of protein, you don't see a ginormous difference between carb and fat substitution. Part of that is having enough muscle that eating carbohydrates post-workout, if you're highly muscled, it is basically a low-carb hack because all that glucose just falls straight into your muscle without, causing any issues whatsoever. But I think protein is kind of the secret all the way around.
I loved your tweet. It was like, in the last 10 years, I replaced carbs with protein and did high-intensity exercise every day, and that was like it. And I just think that's so powerful because it's like you're just taking the core fundamentals of what has affected or what has changed your health ultimately.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do, is just dumb it down as basic as possible. And it's like, put maximum tension on your muscles and eat some protein.
I was hoping you could kind of reconcile something for me, which I still struggle with, and being such an expert in diet, I thought you could help. So I was listening to Dave Asprey on the James Altucher show recently, and I took this quote because I knew I was going to be talking to you, and I wanted to ask you. Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Cool. It's those AirPods, they're not as secure, you see, that's the issue. So he said, so Asprey was saying, and I'm pretty sure this is like pretty spot on what he said, there isn't evidence that eating too much fat, that there isn't evidence that you get fat eating too much of the right fat. Now, I heard that and I thought, I'm not sure if that's true. What do you think about that statement? Is there validity in that, or?
Well, okay, I do. I have a study from the 1950s that the Germans did, where someone had to drink 5,000 calories a day of just pure corn oil, and they literally gained no fat at all. But I think I think for anyone who's eating carbs and fat together, you're definitely going to see such a thing as too much fat, even if it's quote-unquote good fat. And the reason for that is basically the interaction between carbohydrate and fat on a cellular level, at a mitochondrial level. Your mitochondria can only oxidize glucose or fat, and they do that reciprocally. So if you're just eating carbs and no fat, yes, you're going to only be burning glucose, but it's fine because you're not storing any fat. If you're just eating fat and you don't have any glucose coming in from the outside, you're going to be fine because you're eating a lot of fat, but you're oxidizing a ton of fat. It's when you try to eat a bunch of both that you're really screwed, right? All this exogenous glucose coming in from carbs shuts off fat oxidation because that's just how it works in your mitochondria. Every bit of fat you eat gets stored. And so you're kind of screwed. You're burning glucose in your mitochondria on a cellular level. You're storing all your fat. So I think that if you're eating carbohydrate, there's definitely such a thing as too much fat. But it does look like if you're eating no carbohydrate, you can overeat fat more than you would expect without it. I think you'd have a little bit less fat gain than people would model or expect.
Okay, because I'm trying to reconcile this with the whole calories in, calories out argument, because although I've spoken with you and I've read loads of stuff, I still get so confused about, do calories matter? And there's a pretty strong feeling in the high-intensity training community that calories do matter. So are you telling me that calories don't matter if you're eating the right stuff, or are calories still fundamentally going to matter at the end of the day?
I think that macros are more important than calories. And the reason I say that is because you could dump 200 grams of protein, just 800 calories of pure protein on top of anyone's diet, and they're basically going to gain no fat at all. I mean, you might increase your weight because your lean mass goes up, but you're really not going to drive fat storage with pure protein. I think that you're also going to see very little fat storage in an extremely low carb realm or a very low fat realm. But if you take the same 800 calories and it's just equal parts sugar and lard mixed together and you just eat like a donut, then you're going to partition probably all of that into fat storage. And so I think that macros are probably, well, I'm not going to say more important than calories, but equally important, because if you look at the difference between protein alone versus equal carb and fat mixed together, you get such a dramatic difference in partitioning. I mean, it's really stark. So that's so much bigger than just looking at it from a calorie point of view.
So if you have, let's say you do low fat, low carb, high protein, so the ultimate getting shredded diet, and you eat, you know, let's say your basal metabolic rate is like 1,500 calories a day, but you do that, you eat that type of macronutrient profile, but you're consuming 3,000. Why would you? This is where I get confused. It's because you've got this energy surplus, and there's only so much muscle you can build. So what happens to all of that additional energy? Why don't you just eat that?
You get a lot of thermogenesis. The thermal effect of protein is so high. But one of the reasons why humans can't eat more than a 50% protein diet is because at a certain point you expend more energy digesting and metabolizing the protein than you get from the protein. So you're basically going to die of rabbit starvation if you're extremely lean and you try to eat higher than 50% protein diet. So you just literally can't convert all of that into fat. And so pure protein overfeeding really disproves the it's all about calories thing. I mean, it kind of destroys the it's all about calories myth. I mean, I do think when it comes to energy calories like carbs and fat, yes, it probably is all about calories. But protein is the big exception to the rule there.
So what would happen? Like you would just wee out the protein, or?
Well, first of all, you try to deaminate it and get rid of the nitrogen. And there are some maximum amounts of nitrogen that you can excrete. So you might start getting some ammonia toxicity at higher amounts. But the big problem with rabbit starvation is that you are actually expending more energy to metabolize the protein than you're getting from the protein. And that's why humans can eat 50% protein diets long-term, contrary to most medical textbooks. But you can't go a lot higher than that, or you will probably run out of energy.
Okay, so let's take that example and put it in a context of low carb, high fat. What happens if you end up eating thousands of calories in surplus of, good fats, so butter and like what? Oh,
that's
happens?
A great question. You're going to completely stall out like a ton of people on ketogenic diets, right? I have a bunch of patients who are on ketogenic diets, and the minute they go on a ketogenic diet, the minute they go on a ketogenic diet, they feel like crap for a week or two. Their energy level sucks until they get fat adapted and convert over. And then a lot of these people, they feel better. They don't have to eat as often. They can slip into intermittent fasting. They lose 20 pounds. All their labs look better. But then they just stall out really hard. And I have people stalling out on ketogenic diets because while they're burning fat nonstop, the amount of fat that they're ingesting equals the amount they're burning every day. And it's all about fat balance, right? Yes, you've restricted carbs so you can finally oxidize fat, which everyone who's overweight should do that. Every single person on the planet who's overweight and trying to oxidize more fat should restrict carbohydrates, because carbohydrates displays fat oxidation. So great, you went low carb, now you can burn fat, now you're in ketosis, now you lost some weight. But you're going to completely stall out if the amount of fat you're eating every day equals the amount of fat you're burning every day. And I have a bazillion keto patients who are completely stalled out at a higher than desirable fat mass, or maybe higher than desirable hyperinsulinemia and visceral fat and diabetes and blood sugar levels and anything you can measure metabolically. I have people stalling out because they're literally eating too much fat. And the fix for that is to literally increase the protein to energy ratio of their diet, the protein to fat ratio of their diet. That's exactly the next move you want to make. You keep carbs low so you can oxidize fat most of the time. Then you eat less fat, and now all this fat you're using to run your metabolism comes from your adipocytes rather than your diet.
Okay. So that's really interesting. So that's what happens if someone's stalling on a high-fat, low-carb diet or ketogenic diet. And I know this is very hypothetical, because there comes a point where one doesn't want to eat more fat. But just out of curiosity, if you took that person and instead they ingested a ton more fat, would they continue to stall at the same rate, or would they actually gain fat? That's the thing I don't fully understand.
Oh, they would actually gain fat. And I can give you actual patient examples of that. I can show you patients who've literally gained fat by eating a zero carb ketogenic diet of pretty much just really fatty meat and that sort of thing.
But this is where I get confused, because at the start of this, you were kind of saying that there's that example of that person that drank a ton of corn oil and didn't gain any. So how do you reconcile that?
I think the corn oil is actually a toxic effect because from the polyunsaturated fatty acids. So that was really probably a bad example. I think PUFAs are kind of toxic. This is basically a fatty acid from the plant kingdom, and animals don't seem to make them as much or use them as much, and so I think you're probably looking at a toxic effect there. But it does appear that you can guzzle a lot of corn oil and not store it as fat as a toxic effect. I don't know how helpful that is. But yes, if you're eating too much fat on a zero carb ketogenic diet, you can gain weight. Absolutely, I see this all the time.
Okay, because that sounds like that would support the calorie argument.
That would definitely support a calorie argument, but that's also really, really looking at macronutrients as well. And if you just crank up the protein to fat ratio, you'll probably ingest less calories, but not as fewer calories as you would think if more of them are protein. You know what I mean? So I think, yes, calories absolutely matter, but I think the macro input is huge.
And with regard to protein, if you're eating so this is the thing we haven't really talked about. We talked about kind of how very high protein diet can be really beneficial, but what about the whole, protein turned into glucose via gluconeogenesis? And some people will claim that, in fact, one of the listeners pinged me a question saying that, where is it? Yeah, there was a study, protein drives insulin just as much as carbs. Again, I haven't been through the study on PubMed, but what are your thoughts about that? Is that true?
Well, okay, so there was this old carbohydrate insulin hypothesis that eating carbs raises your insulin, and that causes you to store everything as fat, and that's why carbs make you fat. That's way too simplistic and is basically completely wrong. And the reality is that yes, insulin goes up acutely when you eat carbs, but that's not the real problem. That's just a proxy for what is really going on, which is that you're switching from oxidizing fat to oxidizing glucose and making fat. So in your mitochondria, you can either burn fat or make fat. Burn fat or make fat. You don't want to do both at the same time because you get futile cycling where you're making a fat and burning it immediately afterwards, and that's wasteful, and your body doesn't want to do that. So you're either burning fat or making fat, and insulin going up is a signal that you're going to make fat instead of burn fat. Well, it turns out that in the short acute term, having these insulin spikes doesn't really cause any problem. It's when you eat carbohydrates all day long and you ingest fat with them at the same time. You're basically telling your body, we're not going to burn any fat. We're only going to burn glucose and make fat all day, every day. And then every bit of fat you ingest gets stored in your adipocytes. And then pretty soon you've filled up your adipocytes, and that's when you get insulin resistant and pathological hyperinsulinemia. And now your insulin level's high all the time. Once your insulin level's high all the time, it basically signals that you ran out of fat storage, and you really want to, number one, stop eating glucose, which is causing you to shut off fat oxidation and store all your fat. And you also want to probably eat less fat too, because your fat cells are full. Now you want to be low carb and low fat. What is that? That's eating protein. And that's basically the fastest way to reverse hyperinsulinemia and insulin resistance. But I think people in the past conflated a food that temporarily raised your insulin with having high insulin all the time. And that's why the carbohydrate insulin model is basically dead, in my opinion.
That's really interesting, and I feel really bad because I've seen your insulin resistance talk multiple times, and I find it so complicated, this subject. So I'm really grateful that I have you on the show to explain it to me, because I've watched that video and I was like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. And then I forget about it, 6 months later, because I get focused on other things. So, and then I see other people saying, oh, calories matter and this matters, and actually it's about this. And, we all get bombarded by so much information, it can be very confusing. So I think you did a great job there of just kind of summarizing, what are the real culprits here when it comes to fat gain and stuff. So that's cool. Good stuff. Okay, so let's move on to some other things. Oh yeah, just one other thing. What are your thoughts on the China study that gets thrown around all the time? I'm sure you get hit with that quite a lot. How do you respond to that when people, say, oh, these people live forever? And
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think the China study is abject garbage. And, I would point everyone to Denise Minger's excellent takedown of the China study. It's really just vegan propaganda. And honestly, I feel bad because the low carb sphere, which I'm definitely part of, we cherry pick studies too, and the vegans do the same thing. And it's no wonder nobody has any clue what the heck they're supposed to eat. But the China study is crap, and unfortunately, it's propaganda.
Fair enough. No, I think you're doing a great job in terms of posting all the heuristics on Twitter. I just point everyone to you. It's whenever someone asks me oh, I don't know what to eat to achieve X, Y, and Z, I'm like, just follow Ted Naiman on Twitter and just look at all his media, and that's all you need to know.
Thanks, yeah.
No worries. Just a couple more questions on actual body composition, and then we'll move on to a couple bonus things and then wrap up. Is there an ideal body fat for men and women? Is that actually been proven in terms of a range for men and women? Because I hear it being,
yeah, there's definitely a range for waist to height ratio. So if you look at your waist circumference and you divide it by your height, and you graph that out, it's this really steep U-shaped curve where if it's too low, well, you're probably dying of some horrible disease. But if it's too high, you're definitely going to die of cancer or cardiovascular disease or something like that. So waist to height ratio is really, really, really powerful. And there's definitely a low point of the U-shaped curve where you are the healthiest and you are going to have the fewest chronic disease risks. And it's a little bit lower for women than men, but for men it's about a 0.5 or maybe even a 0.45, and it's a little bit lower for women. But it's all about the waist to height ratio, and you could consider that to be a proxy for body fat, but I've seen the numbers for waist to height ratio. I haven't really seen the numbers for body fat, like a body fat percent.
Right, okay, cool. And I just wondered, is there some people where, regardless of the intervention, they just can't reduce body fat to a certain point, or people that are, I guess, more endomorphic, that tend to hold more body fat generally? Like, is it just some people that just aren't able to reduce body fat to a low level? Or to
there's always
10-15% or whatever.
There's always going to be somebody with a hypothalamic disorder or a brain tumor or something where they are just driven to eat nonstop, and you basically have to imprison them away from food for them to have any success. There's also anyone who's got a medical condition where they're exposed to way too much cortisol or prescription like prednisone or steroids or some of these drugs where your body composition is just automatically going to be awful and you'll automatically overeat, partition everything as fat. So there's always these fringe medical cases where, yes, there's someone who's just not going to get thinner. But I think if you're healthy, I don't really buy all that. I don't buy the endomorph thing because I've been on ketogains and I've seen the before and afters of these people, and it's ridiculous. I mean, you'll see someone in there before and you're like, oh yeah, they're a classic endomorph. This is someone who's just always going to be fat. And then you look at their after and they're just ripped and shredded. So I think that's kind of bullshit. I think if you're medically healthy, there's no reason why you can't radically change your body composition.
Cool. Last time we spoke, we talked about like biohacks and blue blockers and things like that, and you weren't really fond of those people very much, and you wanted to put them all on an island. And I'm just curious about this because there would seem to be, whilst it doesn't serve anyone to get stressed out about this stuff in terms of like becoming obsessive about optimizing every part of their life, there does seem to be some utility in like, moderating exposure to blue light, and maybe some of these other biohacks. And I just wonder, do you still like completely avoid all that stuff yourself, or are you starting to change on that at all? Or
I feel bad because I'm the guy who just, sleeps maybe 5 hours a night, bathed in the sickly blue glow from my PlayStation and a TV and like 6 other screens. I'm just not protecting that part of my circadian at all. And so I feel guilty because I'm getting away with it, but I know it's probably important for a lot of people. So I'm definitely the wrong person to talk to about the sleep side of things and the circadian side of things, because mine has just been completely screwed up.
And you feel like you perform well, you don't need a lot of sleep.
Right. I feel that people on a ketogenic diet have a little bit higher sleep efficiency. There are actually a couple studies to suggest that. And I don't sleep very long, but I feel that I sleep really soundly and I wake up feeling refreshed. I feel great, but I just can't sleep. I really definitely don't sleep more than about 6 hours a night. I mean, I just won't sleep longer than that. And that might be good or bad, but yeah, it is what it is.
You drink coffee as well?
Yes, I do. I drink a lot of coffee. If you are what you eat, I'm about 60% coffee at the moment.
How many cups of coffee will you have a day?
I'll probably drink about 40 ounces of coffee a day.
How much is that in cups? In like an average cup?
Oh gosh, it's like 7-8 cups, something like that.
Really? 7 or 8 cups?
Well, a cup of coffee is technically 6 ounces, I believe.
Wow.
I mean, a regular cup is 8 ounces, but technically a cup of coffee is 6 ounces, and I probably drink 8 of those a day.
Wow. So you don't think there's any health downsides to consuming that much coffee?
I think coffee is a U-shaped curve, just like every other single thing on Earth, and I'm probably pushing the right end of that curve. But you'll have to pry it out of my cold, dead hands. So that seems to be my big vice, my big addiction.
Fair enough. What brand, or your go-to coffee brand that you like to drink?
Oh, just the cheapest. It's basically just drip coffee, just the cheap, whatever I can find.
Right. Okay.
I do like cold brew, and I do make cold brew at home, and I find that I can drink it black so much more easily, and so I'm a big cold brew fan, and I do that a lot.
Okay. Cool. So what have you changed your mind about in terms of, I guess, diet and strength training and the things we talked about today since we last spoke, or in recent memory? So that was probably 6 months ago, probably.
Definitely, I think the frequency and the rest day thing. I used to think, okay, you probably need to work out, every other day at the most. And I don't think that anymore. I really don't. I think that's probably just bro science. I hate to say it. So that's definitely something I've changed my mind about.
And do you feel like you've probably explored all the literature with regard to recovery and that type of thing? Like, how do you know that you've kind of turned over all the stones there?
Well, I really don't. But the problem is everybody has a theory that looks good on paper based on science, but the reality could be something totally different. You know what I mean? So there's a huge difference between theory and practice, a huge difference. And so now I have to take theories like that with a big grain of salt, because there's somewhere out there, while you're doing your rest day or your rest 3 or 4 days, there's somebody out there lifting every day, and they just passed you up. And I just don't know if all these theories translate into practice.
What is the sort of best health and fitness book you've read in recent memory?
Oh, wow. The Nature of Nutrition by Raubenheimer and Simpson. This is all about nutritional ecology.
Right, okay. You read that recently? Or?
Yeah, I read that just last month, yeah. Okay, cool. It's a really good book.
I'm just curious about this. What does your family... You do a lot of stuff on Twitter. You always get the physique out regularly. What does your family think about all that stuff?
Oh, they're totally on board. I've got a wife and a 10-year-old daughter. They both eat this very, we just don't have a lot of junk food in our house, right? It's pretty clean. It's just, high quality animal proteins. We do eat some nuts and fruit and veggies, but it's very carnivorous, and it's very, I think everybody's pretty much on board, and they know I'm slightly crazy, but they also think I'm probably a little bit right as well. And so it's really, I do all the cooking, so that probably makes it more palatable.
What's for
yeah, it's like we're having steak and eggs.
Steak and eggs.
Exactly. But they're pretty much on board. It's it goes over okay. Like our daughter, we don't restrict her at all. She can eat anything she wants. When we go out, she can have whatever she wants. But it's interesting, she'll go to a birthday party and she'll have one bite of cake, and she'll be like, "That's actually kind of gross," and that's
Really?
like, way too sweet. And
That's not like Gary Torp's kids. They're the opposite. Or one of his kids.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. No, so she can do whatever she wants, but it's just interesting how how once you've kind of looked around at what everybody's eating versus maybe what they should be eating, the gap between those two can be really enormous, and sometimes it's like, wow, are you really going to eat all of that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I'm just interested, like your profile has, I'd say, blown up over the last few years. Certainly from your website and then the number of talks you've done, especially the insulin resistance one. How do you spend your time these days? Are you now kind of like a celebrity in the kind of diet and metabolism world? Are you getting invited to stuff left, right, and center? Like, what's your lifestyle like, and how's that changed?
Well, okay, I have to admit that I have a ton of clients coming to see me now just because I do have this sort of low carb or ketogenic approach. And so my practice has changed from, just sort of ordinary family practice medicine to a little bit more focus on, okay, how can I reverse X or Y with my diet? So I am doing a lot more of that these days.
Cool. Okay. Is it your own private practice?
No, I work for the second largest big medical group hospital here in Seattle, and it's just a big multi-specialty group. I'm just one of their primary care doctors.
Do you get recognized in the street at all?
Oh, no.
Seriously, that's never happened to you?
Okay, maybe once or twice, but usually no.
Does that bother? Do you care about stuff like that? Do you ever like embark on all this stuff to increase your fame, or is it just more of like you just want to be able to have a bigger impact ultimately?
Oh yeah, I'm not trying to be famous, or I'm not trying to make any money or anything. I'm really just trying to help people. I'm trying to, I want to democratize all of this. I want to lower the bar of entry. I want to make it accessible. I want to dumb it down so much that with just one picture on a tweet, I can explain, why you should eat a certain way or exercise a certain way. I'm really trying to make it more accessible to just anybody, and that's really my only goal. So, luckily, I have a great job just as a doctor, so I don't have to worry about monetizing any of the stupid crap I come up with. I just get to put it out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I think you're doing a great job, and it's just really cool to see. It's fun following you on Twitter, so no, it's great. That's pretty much it. So what's the best way for people to find out more about you, Ted, and keep up to date with you?
Oh, probably just follow me on Twitter, yeah, I would say.
Cool. No, this has been so much fun. I could just talk to you for hours, and I'm sure you've got better things to do. But
I doubt it.
But no, thank you so much for your time, and I just really enjoyed this conversation. It's you're so easy to talk to as well, which just makes it even better.
I would say the same thing to you. Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. And for all those listening, to find the show notes, links and resources, everything that Ted and I mentioned on this episode and all episodes, please go to corporatewarrior.org. And until next time, guys, thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. Before you head off, head on over to corpwarrior.com to get your free ebook with 6 interview transcripts of some of my top guests, including Dr. Doug McGuff, Drew Bay, and Bill Day Simone, on how to optimize muscle gain, fat loss, and overall health in an efficient, effective, and sustainable way. These transcripts are not verbatim, deliberately. Instead, they've been transcribed in an easy read format to make it more enjoyable and easier for you to quickly pick out what you need and start getting results. To get your ebook, head on over to corpwarrior.com, that's CORP warrior.com, and enter your email address. Then check your email for an email from me with a confirmation link. Once you click the link, you will be instantly redirected to a PDF version of the transcripts. This episode is brought to you by ARX, the most innovative, efficient, and effective all-in-one exercise machines I've ever seen. I was really impressed with my ARX workout. The intensity and adaptive resistance was unlike anything I've ever experienced. I love how the machine enables you to increase the negative load to fatigue target muscles more quickly, and I love how the workouts are effortlessly quantified. The software tracks maximum force output, rate of work, total amount of work done, and more in front of you on screen, allowing you to compete with your previous performance to give you and your clients real-time motivation. The ARX uses a computer-controlled motor to give you the exact amount of resistance your clients need 100% of the time. This means that the resistance can never become dangerous, is intuitive and simple to use, and can provide you with all the results you and your clients are looking for in a fraction of the time. ARX is highly effective and efficient in delivering all of the benefits of exercise, including increased strength, muscle mass, cardiovascular conditioning, bone mineral density, and injury recovery. As well as being utilized by many high-intensity training trainers to deliver highly effective and efficient workouts to their clients, ARX comes highly recommended by world-class trainers and brands, including Bulletproof, Tony Robbins, and Ben Greenfield Fitness. To find out more about ARX and how you can get $1,000 off software licensing when you place an order, that's right guys, $1,000 off, please go to arxfit.com and mention Corporate Warrior in the How Did You Hear About Us field. So again, to get $1,000 off software licensing when you order, head on over to arxfit.com and enter Corporate Warrior in the How Did You Hear About Us field. This episode is brought to you by my former podcast guest, Alex Fergus. Alex is a passionate health coach and has worked with hundreds of clients to help them transform their body composition and health. He's been featured on PaleoFX, the Mind Muscle Project, and Superhuman Coach. Alex is an accomplished athlete representing New Zealand in rowing, winning national bodybuilding titles and breaking powerlifting records. He's an absolute beast and has very impressive quads and won the PaleoFX Real Fit competition, beating people like Ben Greenfield. And get this, 9 months leading up to the competition, Alex only trained for 15 minutes per week using Body by Science high-intensity training principles. Alex pays close attention to every aspect of his health. As a former chronically sleep-deprived young adult, Alex has invested heavily to optimize his own sleep quality for maximum benefit, and has devoted much of his time to researching how to maximize sleep quality to improve your overall health and performance. Alex is giving away a free 4-part sleep improvement series with tips that will help you fall asleep faster, give you more energy, and improve your overall body composition. To get access to his free 4-part sleep improvement series, go to corporatewarrior.co/Alex and sign up now. So again, to significantly upgrade your sleep for free, go to corporatewarrior.co/Alex and sign up now.